It happened again.
A real-life nightmare at 30,000 feet as a passenger went into anaphylactic shock.
Had a medical emergency on a flight, and they made that call.
Is there a medical professional on board on a transatlantic flight? And when I hear that there's a young man going into anaphylactic shock, that means we have to act very quickly.
I know everyone gives me a hard time that I always talk about my epinephrine airplane rescue story, but this time it happened again 3 separate times.
Are you kidding me?
It's like I'm a magnet for this stuff, but it's a story I absolutely have to share with you. It was a typical flight from New York to Paris, and the flight was going well. We took off safely, the food was about to be served, and they make that announcement. Is there a doctor on board? And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, should we do this again? Should I help? Should I wait to see if other people volunteer first? No one was volunteering, at least in my area. So I raised my hand, I stood up, I presented myself to the flight attendant and said, I'm a physician, how can I help? And they said, whoa. Are you really a doctor? I said, yeah. And they said, no, show us your card. They looked at it, they said it looks legit enough to be real. At which point someone stood up and said, well, I'm actually a doctor too. I'm an ENT doc. And I said, oh, really? Maybe you wanna help? And he goes, well, unless someone needs to get their ears cleaned, I don't think I'm gonna be of any help. Are you an ER doc? I'm family medicine. He goes, better you do it. I said, okay. One of the other flight attendants had already grabbed someone who happened to be a nurse, spoke mostly French, which will end up to be quite useful. We get to the back of the plane. There's an individual in tears, in pain, holding their side. I have no information, so I start asking the individual some questions. Zero English. I knew this was gonna be hard, but I didn't realize how hard it was about to get. No Wi-Fi, no good internet at that moment, so I couldn't use any of my translator apps. Luckily, the nurse spoke English, so the nurse was asking the individual questions, also communicating with me in the small amount of English that they did know. Turns out, patient has a history of kidney stones, was experiencing flank pain, which is like pain kind of on the side of your body, radiating to the back. The patient said that this is the very same pain that she experienced when she had a kidney stone in the past. She didn't say anything prior to takeoff because she thought the pain she was experiencing was due to her cycle. She thought she was just getting menstrual cramps and kind of wrote it off. But as the plane took off, the pain got worse and worse. In that moment, I started thinking about the old medical story that we would tell students, how there was once a study that showed sending patients who have kidney stones onto a roller coaster can dislodge the kidney stone. I'm like, I wonder how bad the turbulence is gonna get on this flight. Obviously, I had to correct myself and course correct there and say, okay, we're not gonna have the pilot create turbulence to rattle this kidney stone free. So I performed a small physical exam, checked her abdomen, it was non-tender, normal pulse, temperature was normal oxygen level, checked her blood pressure was normal also. But when I went to go check for CVA tenderness, which is a test where we literally tap on the costovertebral angle on the back, where the kidneys are essentially. And if the patient jumps, it's a good sign that there's something going on with the kidney. Sometimes it could be kidney stone related, other times it could be pyelonephritis, which is an infection of the kidneys. So we realized that the patient has a kidney stone, is in 10 out of 10 severe pain. I realized we have to think about pain control. I asked the flight attendants, what medication options do we have in their kit? The kit that I haven't seen since the epinephrine days. And now this is not Delta, this is Air France, so it's a new kit. They show me the kit, we break it open, we look into it, and we see a list of medications that are all in French, some of which are translatable easier than others, like the name just has like a little accent mark on it, but others are completely new medications that I've never heard of. So I told the flight attendant, look, I'm not very comfortable with using these medications, given the fact that I'm not familiar with them. She said, we have to go to the cockpit, you have to speak with the pilots and ground control. I said, wow, okay. Even last time that I had my medical emergency, I didn't go in the cockpit. They came out to speak with me. So we go to the cockpit, I go in, introduce myself to the two pilots. I explain what's going on. They ask me if I think we should divert. Given that the flight attendant told me that once we leave land, which we're about to leave land from Canada, flying across the Atlantic Ocean, we will not have an ability to land in an emergency. I said, I think it's best we land. I think it's best we divert. Even though I know everyone would hate me for saying that. I was just thinking about what's best for the patient. So the pilot literally gives me his own headset. I put it on. I start speaking to someone. I say the age of the patient, the medical history, the physical exam, the vital signs, and they say, we do not divert for kidney stones, nephrolithiasis. And I said, okay, well, if you're comfortable recommending which medication to give, I'm happy to give it, but I just don't know any of these medications because they're French medications. They said, okay, give Accupen. I'm like, Accupen? They're like, Nefepam. And that's one of the medications that was on the list. Actually, I took a picture while I was in the cockpit of this medication list because I was trying to get reception to ask one of these AIs to translate it for me. But on the list, it says the medicine is an injection, which means you have to either start an IV and give it through the IV or give it IM intramuscularly. The nurse, rock star that he is, starts the IV. Patient starts looking a little bit better, but still in a lot of pain, crying, sweating, screaming. I run up to the pilots to give them a status update. They say, okay, great. We're not diverting, we're leaving land. I said, okay. I go back, she's vomiting now. And this is a problem because whenever you have kidney stone pain, if it's really bad, you can develop what's known as hydronephrosis, where urine actually backs up into the kidney and starts creating damage and pain and swelling. It's very uncomfortable. And we realized we have to give her a medication for the nausea and vomiting. Luckily, I recognized one of those, metoclopramide. I believe it's Reglan here in the United States. Their brand is a little different. So we give that dose. Patient starts feeling a little better. We go in, I tell the pilots, they say, great. I'm like, we solved the problem. The patient's stable. We'll keep checking vitals every hour. Walk out of the cockpit. There's another person laying on the floor right next to the cockpit. And I look at the flight attendants, I go, what's going on? They go, doctor, another patient, you have to help. And I go, what? I was just about to sit after a 2-hour ordeal. This individual ends up speaking English, which made it a lot easier for me, much more difficult for the French nurse. So they left. They're very lightheaded, dizzy, nauseous, asking if I have Dramamine. And I asked, are you someone who gets motion sick on planes, on boats? No, I don't. Well, that doesn't add up. Why are you suddenly motion sick? And I said, look, based on what you're describing here, I feel like you ate something or just need to vomit out something out of your system. 30 minutes later, as I'm standing there with her, she starts vomiting profusely, suddenly felt a lot better. I explained that it's possible that she ate something that didn't agree with her. Perhaps she had something on her hands. Flight attendant says, okay, look, I'm filling out this paperwork on the first person. Tell me what happened with the second one. I proceed to tell the story and I said, well, probably food poisoning. And she goes like this. And I'm like, what did I say? Is that a problem? Doctor, if it's food poisoning, that means we have to do a food analysis and there's like a whole protocol for this. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's not food poisoning because no one else is sick. Maybe she just ate with dirty hands. She goes, we'll go with that unless someone else starts getting sick too. I said, fair enough. We fill out her paperwork. Now I can go back to my seat. There's like 3 hours left in this flight. I'm like, maybe I'll get a little shut-eye. I sit, I'm like, cool, I'm gonna watch this movie. No, not a movie, I was watching The Agency. I start watching the first episode, 20 minutes in, the flight attendant comes over. I'm like, oh, she's probably gonna say thank you for helping me out earlier. And she goes, there's another one. I said, no, come on, you're joking. She goes, no. We need your help. Please come to the back of the plane. I'm like, no way, this is happening. A third one. This has got to be a Guinness World Record. We have to call David Rush.
I've broken about 300 Guinness World Records titles.
Wow.
By the way, my girlfriend the whole time, knocked out asleep, doesn't know what's going on. When I was in the cockpit for the second time, telling the pilots about not diverting, she texts me, where am I? And it's been a really long time that I've been in the bathroom. And I'm like, I'm not in the bathroom, I'm in the cockpit. And she just goes, you're messing with me, right? And I'm like, no, I'm in the cockpit, potentially diverting this flight. And apparently that wasn't scary for her because she went back to sleep while I'm dealing with third patient on this flight. I basically did hours, which is what we call like working in a clinic. I ran clinic in the sky. So I go back to see patient number 3 or individual number 3. Turns out this individual got lightheaded going to the bathroom, no chest pain. He does have diabetes and perhaps not greatly controlled diabetes. He said his sugar yesterday that he tested was 180, which is high, but not medical emergency high. So I said, let's check it now. In the medical kit, they actually had a finger stick, a glucose finger stick monitor. So we checked with the glucometer, the sugar, it was 210. I say, you're not allowed to consume any more sugars on this plane. Let's just have you drink water. We get him to drink some fluids. He rehydrates up, feels better, get him back to his seat. 10 minutes later, his wife gets me again. Not feeling well, he's shivering, I'm really worried. I come back and I see that this is one of these psychosomatic reactions where he's really worried about something bad happening because the severity of what he was experiencing was not matching the physical exam. And I explained that It's not unusual that he's very worried about it. Perhaps if he has his medicine for his diabetes, we can consider taking that. He takes metformin, which is one of the old school medications that we use for diabetes. It works quite well. It's not like insulin, where if I give it to you, it lowers your blood sugar right away. In fact, when I start a patient on metformin, it takes at least a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, to actually see its full impact on someone's average blood sugar. But this patient was very worried. The patient says that he takes 500 twice a day, which is a pretty low dose of metformin. I said it's totally reasonable to take an extra dose. And I said that knowing that it probably won't change his blood sugar in that moment, but I knew it would give him some reassurance, and there was no medical reason not to. So I said, you could take one now. He said he took it, he right away felt better. Which I know medically it didn't change anything, but the placebo effect was real. He stayed calm for the rest of the flight. Like an hour later, we landed. It was an incredible experience. I started getting emails the second we land. Air France, here's a credit for volunteering, $350. Second email, here's a credit for volunteering again, $125. I'm like, why was the first one $350? Higher acuity? Did I get more RVUs on that one? The flight attendants were very grateful. They were very kind, very sweet, very helpful, followed all the protocols to the T. And as we were walking out, she hugged me and said, you're an angel. Thank you so much for helping. And holds up a paper like this with a QR code on it. And she goes, do you mind scanning this? And I'm like thinking to myself, oh, she's gonna give me another like frequent flyer thing. I'm like, I don't need it, it's okay. She goes, no, please scan it. And I go to start scanning it with my phone. I'm like, what is this that I'm scanning? She goes, oh, we want you to join the Doctors on Board program. Oh, the next time you're on a plane, we don't have to ask if there's medical doctors on board. We'll just go directly to your seat. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'll be volunteering to be the doctor for Air France for as long as I live. Perhaps I want to reserve the right to not volunteer if I don't feel well or if I had some alcohol. So I'm not going to sign up for this program. But it just goes to show it's unpredictable taking flights these days. And some people say it's because of air traffic controllers. And that's true. There are delays, but there's also a lot of medical emergencies. I have never met a physician who's had 3 separate medical emergencies that all worked out to this extent. Even the nurse who was on the plane with me, I thank them for their help as well. They sent me a DM like a few days after saying that their colleagues knew who I was and they were jealous, and everything worked out for the first patient because they ended up going to the airport emergency room. But wow, what a story. I can't believe this happened again. People do a lot of strange things on airplanes, a lot of them unhealthy actually. Click here to check out my reactions to those. And as always, stay happy and healthy.